Welcome back. The 13th anniversary of the Marikana massacre continues to evoke emotions for families who lost their loved ones. This comes as many have spoken up on the neglect of minors who continue to face disparity many years later. Today's commemoration event of the deaths of 34 miners at the Lonmin mine at the hands of police was also marked by a somber mood during the roll call of the miners.
Bonginkosi yona Thobisile zibambele Steleha Merik Gadlela Janarek Rafael Liao Mafolisi Mabia Julius Tokoti Mangojwa Anele Mtizeni.
Let's get more reaction now. I'm joined by Nomzamo Zondo, who's the director at the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa. Nomzamo, good to have you on the program despite the circumstances. So it's been 13 years since the Marikana massacre. From your perspective, how would you describe the emotional and legal state of the families affected today?
Look, early this month, on the 7th of August, we were at a mediation at the Pretoria High Court with the families. And I can say from the words that were shared on that day, from the families that won, they're resolute. And on the other hand, they feel that after all they've been through, their only trust is God. So Zameka Nungu, Mr. Luhupa's widow, spoke about how God cannot fail them again. Already they've had to go through the pain of the loss. God will ensure that they get justice. Mr. Snovuyonoki shared how the families must continue to fight. That yes, it's been a long journey, it's been many, many years, but they must stand and defend the names and the lives of their loved ones. And so I would say they are resolute. They remain firm in their belief that they must pursue justice and will continue to do so.
Your organization, SERI, has consistently highlighted the lack of accountability related to the Marikana massacre. What does the continued impunity suggest about the state of South Africa's justice system, if you will?
Look, early on, the families kind of understood how they were treated as a matter of being second-class citizens. And their experience in the last 13 years confirms that there are people that the justice system can work for at specific times, and that for others, they must fight until the bitter end. And I'm kind of reminded by what Jim Nichols, who was a lawyer who was part of our team, who's actually based in the UK, who reminded the families of the Hillsborough disaster, where families fought for close to 3 decades to get justice. And he said to them in 2015 that they must be prepared for such a fight. And I think for the families, from how they've been treated by the NPA, by the police, by the state attorney, unfortunately, it's given a very partial understanding of the justice system, that it works for those it wants to work for. And if it doesn't, if it deems you unworthy, you not get justice from it.
Yeah. Despite the Farlam Commission's findings, Nomzamo, why do you believe there's been no significant criminal accountability for these killings?
Look, I think if the National Prosecuting Authority had set aside sufficient resources and been provided with sufficient resources to investigate all of the actions that led to the deaths in Marikana in that week, from the get-go, from the release of the report, would be in a very different situation. The fact that we stand now 13 years later without even an idea of when the prosecutions would happen for the killings on the 16th of August, tells us that lack of readiness, the lack of political will on the side of the NPA is the reason why we're here. I know that in 2023, they had communicated that as the Northwest DPP, they've set aside resources to execute and implement prosecutions for Marikana. But even now, we haven't seen much of that.
Yeah. Only 2 public order policing recommendations have reportedly been implemented here in this matter. What are the implications of this failure for future protest policing in South Africa?
Look, I mean, we look at Marikana. We look at what happens what happened during Fees Must Fall. We look at what happened post-COVID. There's been a general lack of accountability by the police. There's been a challenge of impunity when it comes to the management of crowd situations. And the only hope and the only light that we have is the fact that at least at a policy level, we see that there's been some movement in the side of the police trying to bring in the recommendations of the panel of experts on crowd management and policing. And we hope that that would mean that there'll be a change. But without those recommendations being implemented, so if there might be police policy, but without them being implemented, we are likely to see similar incidents in the future.
Yeah. But how is SERI engaged with the state or the National Prosecutions Authority on really pushing for prosecutions here? And what barriers have you encountered, if there are any?
Look, so it's been a very complex process. There've been 2 matters where the NPA has prosecuted in relation to Marikana. One in relation to the attempts by the police to hide where Mr. Sakhalala died, and then the murders and the injury and assaults on people on the 13th of August 2012. And in that process, firstly, we were, I think, fortunate to have a close working relationship with the team that was prosecuting those 2 cases. Our clients were able to have a front seat view and could attest to how hard the NPA team was working to get justice for them. We ourselves were invested in the process, assisting the IPID to locate witnesses, trying to find mine workers who have since retired, trace others who've found new employment elsewhere. But unfortunately, even with that investment, we haven't seen really the NPA move sufficiently, especially on the prosecutions around the 16th of August.
Nomzamo, let's explore the issue of compensation. Many of the survivors and families are still waiting for this compensation. Can you update us on where things currently stand with reparations and what remains outstanding in this matter?
Sure. It is probably a little bit frustrating because so the last time the police paid the families of the deceased miners was in 2019, and those payments had started in 2018, and they were in relation to the loss of support claims of 34 to 36 families that we represent. For the 2 families who had not been paid in 2019, they have still not been paid. One family, the Ministry of Police's stance is that they are not entitled to any compensation because the mine worker who passed away is someone who had been supporting his adult unemployed siblings and their children. And then for one family, we are in a situation where they've simply said they are trying to get more experts and get new calculations.
Yeah.
They have refused to compensate for any of the pain and suffering. They hold a view that they don't have to apologize to the families, that there is no legal obligation on the state to apologize for the massacre. And the position is that we must find it out in court. The reason we're in mediation earlier on this month is in order for us to get a court hearing, a court date for the trial where the court will have to order the state to apologize and to provide further compensation.
But Nomzamo, what would real justice look like for the Marikana families beyond prosecutions that we speak of and also the issues around compensation?
Look, at the core, it's really an acknowledgement of the injustice of the massacre itself, the injustice of the fight for justice in the last 13 years, having to year in and year out claim justice. I mean, many of the families have lost loved ones from the day of the massacre to date. Even this year, we buried a sister of one of the mine workers, and the families are able to trace that all of those illnesses, the different ailments, the at least 2 suicides that they've suffered are connected to the massacre. But it would really, at the core, would be an acknowledgement from the state, an acknowledgement from Sibanye Stillwater, which has taken over Loanman's operations, that there was an injustice done to the families. And I think the families have, I think from quite early on, have said, acknowledge this massacre post-1994, like the other massacres that were acknowledged pre-1994, declare the 6th of August as a public holiday. And do that not as a trade. I think at some point, President Ramaphosa had offered to trade Marikana Day for May Day. And the family said, but it's two different bases. If you recognize what happened in Marikana separately from recognizing from Workers' Day. And so I think those 2 things would go a long way in the families feeling like their pain is recognized by those who wronged them.
Let's unpack this theme a bit more. These calls for August 16 to be declared Marikana Memorial Day and for the Kopi to become a formal memorial site. Do you believe these are essential towards justice and healing? Why or why not?
So the families have consistently affirmed that they are grieved by the fact that the places where their loved ones died are public warfares. And I think even Sibanye Stillwater acknowledged this, and there was a process that was started, I think, in 2022, if not 2021, which was about the design of a memorial. Sibanye Stillwater had even at least informed us and the families that they've issued a trade of the land, because the land belongs to the tribal authority, so that the land could then be used for a memorial. I think the acknowledgement, I mean, there is I think earlier on you showed visuals of the memorial outside the LPD at Lonmin. And our clients have consistently said the memorial needs to be at the Kopi, where the lives were lost. The memorial needs to be at the Kopi, which is almost a sacred ground for us and a sacred grounds for our loved ones, because that's the last place that they were alive. And both the public holiday and this memorial would show respect to the families for their loss, but also be a way to honor the lives that were lost.
Nomzamo, as we wind down our conversation, how do you interpret the relationship between corporate power, the state, and law enforcement in the events that unfolded at Marikana and today's South Africa more broadly?
Look, I think our clients mostly came from the rural Eastern Cape. Some of them came from rural Lesotho, Swaziland, and most of them basically were from rural communities, where their engagement with the police were understood as people who protect them from crime, who protect them and who protect them from places of vulnerability. And so it couldn't have been in their minds that the police would be there standing on the side of one party. Even today, they always ask the question, why were the police called when there was a dispute between an employer and his employees? And it brings really that question of how is it that corporate power can use state power and use the security forces of the country to break a strike in the situation where people are simply calling for a living wage. And Marikana, every 16th day of August, brings out that question of if we understand this to be a government of the people, how is it that the state's power could have been used to protect the interest of the mine against the people living in this country?
And finally, what message does the failure to secure justice at Marikana, what message does it send to other vulnerable workers and communities fighting for basic rights here?
So on the 8th of August, AMCU held the annual memorial lecture And Professor Lucas Ngwetjana was there, and he gave the keynote, theming it, "We refuse to graze." And he was explaining how the idea of grazing was about how Black people must accept whatever is open to them, just like animals who are left out to pasture, to just graze. And he was saying, we refuse to graze. We demand that we must eat. And the fact that we've had this 13 years of injustice, 13 years of a failure to acknowledge the pain of the families, is almost saying to every other poor Black person who lives in this country, keep your head down. Keep your head down, or the guillotine will fall on you. And then even though everyone can witness what happened to you, we'll continue to insist that you deserve what happened to you. If not, we'll continue to insist that justice is not delivered to you.
Yeah. Nomzamo Zondo, Executive Director of the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, thank you for your unwavering advocacy and also sharing your insights with us this evening as we mark 13 years since the Marikana massacre. Her words remind us that justice delayed is not only justice denied, it's a scar of the conscious and our democracy.